You can sign up with Facebook to comment.
Yeah, Sonny.
Hello everyone, Sonny here. I am at Sean Hurley's house. Sean Hurley is an up-and-coming documentary maker and a veteran of Zeitgeist. I've known him for probably 3 years plus. Today we'll be discussing the project that he's undertaken, and it has the present name of the Human Experience Beyond Temporal Spans. So it's going to be a very wide-ranging documentary and a very wide-ranging discussion. So what we're going to do at the start is play the trailer that he has created and set up all the social media accounts. Now, to get in on the conversation, all you need to do, if you're listening to us, is sign in on the same page where this audio is playing live. You can sign into Speaker using your Facebook and just drop us some comments, which we'll get to. Okay, so here comes the introduction. Sorry, the trailer. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah.
I now know with the resources we already mined, the knowledge we already have, it's highly feasible to take care of all of humanity at a higher standard of living than anybody's ever known. We now know actually the critical path of how we phase out the fossil fuels burning, how we phase out the nuclear, how we do bring in the wind power, how we do bring in the hydrogen powers and so forth. It actually can be done by 1985.
In the United States of America, when millions of people were going and shopping like crazy, there were a few million other people around the world who didn't buy a single thing.
Oh, it's so hard to believe. Collie, I mean, Black Friday is like a tradition. People love to go out on this day and shop. We absolutely love it. Why do you want them to quit shopping?
But think about it. After this very spiritual holiday of Thanksgiving, why is it that our culture is somehow then requiring us to go out the next day and max out on our credit cards and buy probably more than we need to buy? I think that what those millions of people who went shopping today, I think what they're missing is they don't quite understand the consequences of their consumption, because overconsumption has ecological consequences. You know that overconsumption is in some sense the mother of all our environmental problems.
Oh, come on, environmental problems?
Light them all up. Come on, fire.
Queen Miss Ford that was with us. Thank you so much for being here.
And Brandon swallowed a front kick to his stomach. Then he punched the man repeatedly while he was on the ground.
It's all about going after Americans who are struggling in poverty.
If it were up to me, I would not have another mosque built in this country.
The jury found George Zimmerman not guilty.
It's very important that we don't forget the growth and the jobs.
You're going to choke off job recovery in the future. Everybody knows that.
The Duchess of Cambridge has gone to labor.
Competition is expected to only get fiercer with a limited number of jobs.
The market is rigged against you. Our priority has to be jobs and what Wall Street is doing well.
We cannot continue down this path.
Coming up here today, I have no hidden agenda. I am fighting for my future. Losing my future is not like losing an election or a few points on the stock market. I am here to speak for all generations to come. I am here to speak on behalf of the starving children around the world whose cries go unheard.
Hello,
देशवासियों की ओर से नमस्कार विश्व शांति हो
I think the main legacy of Voyager is to, in fact, have opened up our solar system in a way which was not possible before the space age. It revealed all of our neighbors in the solar system, and it showed us how much there was to learn and how diverse the bodies are that share the solar system with our own planet Earth.
I am afraid to go out in the sun now because of the holes in our ozone. I'm afraid to breathe the air because I don't know what chemicals are in it. I used to go fishing in Vancouver, my home, with my dad, until just a few years ago we found the fish full of cancers. And now we hear of animals and plants going extinct, every day vanishing forever.
I think that I'm proudest of the impact Voyager really had, and it was surprising. I did not realize how much impact it would have. When we flew by Neptune, people were standing in line at night at planetariums in order to be able to see the images coming in from Voyager because they weren't on the web in those days.
It just means that our science, the science of planetary astronomy, is alive and well and expanding.
Wait a minute.
It just means that our science, the science of planetary astronomy, is
what is it?
Alive and well and expanding.
I'm only a child and I don't have all the solutions. But I want you to realize, neither do you. You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up in a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert. If you don't know how to fix it, please stop breaking it.
We got into the mess by not paying attention and by business as usual. Humans have been on this planet for something like 1 million years. And for the vast bulk of that time, things change extremely slowly. Population increased very slowly. Our technology increased, improved, but by very slow steps. And just recently, this is what's called an exponential. It's flat for a long time, and then boom, you suddenly get a huge increase. Increase in population, increase in technology, increase in pollution, increase in our powers to disturb the environment, to change the planetary environment. But we're the same old human beings as we were 1,000 years ago and 100,000 years ago. Not much has changed with us. And so it's very hard for us to catch on that there's a new situation, and we have to adapt to it. On the other hand, that's one thing we humans are good at, adapting, figuring out. We're smart. That's our principal advantage over all the other species. We're not faster, stronger, better diggers. We don't fly all by ourselves. What we do is figure out and build because of our hands. And so I think there's certainly a chance of getting out of this mess, but not by business as usual, not by the idea that we shouldn't plan ahead, not by the idea that anybody can do whatever the hell they want and it doesn't affect the environment. There has to be a new way of looking at the world.
We must keep our eyes on the main goal. We need financial institutions that are healthy enough to deliver the credit our economies need to create growth and jobs. Growth and jobs. Growth and jobs.
We take, we make, and we dispose. A new phone comes out, so we ditch the old one. our washing machine packs up, so we buy another. Each time we do this, we're eating into a finite supply of resources and often producing toxic waste. It simply can't work long term.
We can say without a doubt that this system is an absolute failure. From the most rational, objective, economic standpoint, it's a failure. Less than 5% of the world's population live in the United States. We are consuming over 25% of the world's resources and creating roughly 30% of its major pollution. That's a failure. Ultimately, we've got to go to the root cause of the wound. Where is this disease coming from? Where is this injury coming from? What's the problem? And in almost every case today, the problem is the system we've created.
Hello! So, unfortunately, we have a sound of a boiling kettle in the background. Other distractions have been taken care of. The playful dog is outside. The lively family are going for a walk. But we still have tea in the background, which I'm sure the rest of you listening from the Anglo-Saxon world should be able to understand. Now, I suppose we got to start somewhere at the beginning. I could talk about a million things with Sean, but this is going to be about his up-and-coming documentary project, which I've probably spent the last 3 hours talking about, and I haven't asked the initial origin story question. So Sean, how did it all begin?
I guess it started probably about 3 years ago, really, when I started looking into systems, the systems we live in on the planet. And then I guess I looked at that for a couple of years, looked at economic systems, natural systems of the environment, and decided I was going to make a film. And it started out as an idea for maybe a 2-hour film that then stretched to, well, maybe to cover everything I'll have to do 3 hours. And the more I learned, the more I researched about the natural environment, our impacts on it, our behavioral patterns, I realized that 3 hours just wasn't going to cut it. It wasn't going to be able to comprehensively identify everything we were doing and explain how it was impacting on the environment. So I thought...
So the question is, did you have a clear idea of what you were trying to explain?
Oh, absolutely. I knew that I needed to look at the damage we were doing to the planet, how we were doing the damage, and what we could do differently to mitigate the amount of damage we were doing. So after looking at all of that and continually researching everything, I decided that because 3 hours just wasn't going to be long enough, and it's too long of a film. 3 hours is so long, you're not going to hold people's attention. So I had to completely abandon the idea of a film and come up with a new format. So I've decided on a 16-episode series of 1 hour.
Yeah.
1 hour. 1 hour episodes, 16 episodes to cover everything.
So I could almost put the synapses from the Big Bang to the big financial crash.
Yeah.
And the environmental crash and the potential.
Yeah, I think it's more of a environmental grinding than anything else. I mean, it's almost like if there was a crash, people would be more inclined to do something.
Yeah.
But because it's such a slow grinding process, it eludes people. They don't They don't see it as important. They don't think it really matters so much.
I think the boiling frog analogy works really well with the notion of how environment is damaged.
Absolutely.
So little happens on a daily basis that you notice the difference from one day to the next. That you don't see that environment change. It's just like the frog. If you put it in boiling water, it would have jumped out and survived. But if that water is heated very, very gently, it faints and boils to death. So where do you go next if you're going to say, we're going to explain how and why the world is fucked?
Right.
What, in your view, would be sort of a top list of root causes that when people understand, they can sort of extrapolate to the bigger picture? People would say, well, it's the big corporations, or it's the banks, it's the governments that are corrupt, or it's modern culture, or it's what would be sort of your top list of causes, or perhaps ways in which we should look at the world from some type of a different perspective, perhaps a bigger picture?
I think our cultural conditioning has played a huge role in where we are. And it actually, because of our cultural conditioning, we don't see the bigger picture. It's kind of restricted from us because our whole lives were born into this systems approach to how we live our lives. And at no time during the first 18 years of our lives did we really ever get any incentive to question it. We're just taught about it and how to fit into it. So I think it's difficult. We like to blame the banks. We like to blame the 1%. We like to blame. We like to point fingers at people and institutions. But the reality is that it's our support of the entire structure of the way we live that is creating this massive feedback loop of destruction to the planet, and we don't see it because of how slowly it happens. And because in certain situations the damage is so far away that we don't actually notice it either. Like if we buy whatever we buy during a year or whatever, and we throw stuff away, then I mean that's pretty much it to people generally. It gets thrown away into the bin, goes into a rubbish truck, and it's gone. But not as many people realize that a lot of that rubbish ends up in the ocean. Or a lot of that rubbish gets shipped off to Ghana, or it goes to China to sit and rot. When it's supposed to be recycling, it's not.
Yeah, it's incredible when you look at what happens to world's e-waste. Basically, it gets put on ships and dumped on the coast of Western Africa. You said Ghana, the most common place. So there's mountains of e-waste where people go around setting fires to mountains of cables so they can pull the copper out and sell it for a few cents, all the meanwhile inhaling cancerogenic chemicals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of something that eludes people as well is the fact that a lot of the oil, we get a lot of oil out of Africa. We get a lot of rare earth minerals out of Africa. And the oil and the rare earth minerals end up being used to produce the products we consume. And then we throw those products away and they go back to Africa. And then, so we basically steal all the oil and resources from Africa through the IMF. All right? And then we take them, thank you to the IMF, and then we use them. They become waste, and we ship them back to Ghana and Africa and those African nations. And those African nations have to pay for the waste. So they're getting ripped off twice and left screwed. And because it's so far away, and because it's not in the public eye, and because you don't turn on your television set and see this, you don't think about it.
I mean, it's almost like, to use a slightly esoteric analogy, and people say as above, so below. The notion that we have atoms that look a whole lot like solar systems, and maybe a human being to an Earth could be like a cell to a body of a human being, and so on and so on. But At a social level, in the West, we live in a very, very hierarchical, sort of stratified society where, half of 1% of people accrue so many resources that they use those resources to leverage their power. They use it to influence politicians, to pass laws that suit the billionaires of this world. They influence it to teach in high schools and universities the under quotation mark science of economics, by which everything that they do is rationalized. I mean, you really need a lot of big fancy words and diagrams in a paper to say, well, the situation where he has 10,000 times more than the other guy that looks just like him makes sense. So what I was going to say, in here, in the West, to a large extent, what you have is something of an underclass. More than 50% of population working paycheck to paycheck just to survive, as a very small portion of it, lives very, very comfortably, virtually off the labor of the poor people. I mean, we glorify, not that they're, I hate to dismiss the notion that, the people that are the richest don't contribute or innovate. Some of them are the most contributing, innovative people on the planet, but even a mass of them are simply parasites. And this picture of how the few exploit and control the many in the West scales up. It scales up because the few in a global system, a few corporations that mostly benefit people in the West get their own countries to bully Africa, be it through the IMF or whatever, World Bank or whatever international organizations, into basically, working to extract their own resources and hand them over and then paying for the waste. We are given a message, a very interesting one in the West, that, these poor Africans, they just can't get it together. They just, they keep electing these dictators that oppress them. And the stories never go deep enough, because how do you become a dictator in Africa? You have support from outside. There's people that sit at a table and negotiate trade deals with these dictators. There's people that pay them to get elected, and so on and so on. So we live in a system, that we've sold this notion of democracy to the world, where just about every country you look at, there's some major exceptions, perhaps China, Syria, Libya fell, Syria's about to, where you have sort of a one-party system. There's one organization in the rulership. Russia, perhaps now as well. And that doesn't suit the West or the corporations. But if you have two equal parties, a couple million sways the election and gets them to pass the laws that you need. So in other words, we brought this thing called freedom and democracy, and in effect, what this means when you apply it to a third world country that doesn't have an educational system, doesn't have free press, doesn't have generally an informed citizenry, means that for very cheap money you can install your own dictators. You don't need to overthrow governments, you don't need to do army invasions, you don't need to hold territory. The elections are much, much, much cheaper to swing than colonialism was. Back in the days of the British Empire, they had to get tens of thousands of people on ships, and they had to keep these people down, and it was, had to enslave people. Like today, it's the imperialistic world 2.0. It's efficient, and it's all done under the cloak of freedom, justice, democracy, and really, perhaps the only improvement, given, say, the potential of how good we could live, with the potential how well they could live in 1800s, it's still, we're at like 5% of what we could be, like we were then. The only thing we've improved on is the myths got better. They didn't have the myths of freedom, democracy, capitalism, such things.
Capitalism is in competition with progress itself. I mean, you don't. If we progressed,
would you say that that's like a universal truth, or is it capitalism occasionally progressing, occasionally diametrically opposed to progress? Like,
I think we get progress in capitalism when it suits capitalism. When people figure out how they can continue to make a profit after a certain progress has been made. If they if you can't figure out how to keep generating profit from a technical advancement in our society, then that technical advancement is never going to see the light of day. Period. It doesn't matter.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
We might have had slaves rowing boats from England to wherever years ago, but now we have slaves that go to jobs to pay for the right to live on a planet they were born on. Yeah. The slavery is different, but we're still slaves. We're all still slaves to the system.
Well, America is now, the sort of ultimate prototype of this capitalism. But if you look back into the writings of just pre-revolutionary, post-revolutionary United States, start of the 19th century, they actually termed working for a living wage slavery. So what we, it's great, you got a job, it's a good job, this is how you get interviewed. The founders of the freest country in the world defined that very thing as slavery. The very concept, even though it was a capitalistic idea, the very concept was that every man was a master of his own destiny, his own boss, and that it was going to function as a wider system of say, smaller businesses, smaller enterprises. We live in a digital age, where it makes more sense to combine into bigger organizations of people. And that's okay. And this is kind of where capitalism no longer offers the solutions it once did. Capitalism, where I have a small business and so do 28, 100,000 people in the small town, where, nobody is affected by decisions by people that are removed 7 layers from them. They have someone like a boss. It's someone they look in the eyes a bunch of hours in a day. Probably a system like that would make us live dramatically better. But when you scale it up, when you have people called shareholders that actually have all the rights in a company, that have got no association with people that work in it. Like, you own the company that other people work for, and you have a meeting once a month, the shareholders meeting. It is that level of separation. I mean, it is, if you think about it at a deeper level, ask yourself, who am I working for? Who owns the company? Odds are you don't even know. Odds are it's some faceless, nameless old people living in New York, Texas, the Bahamas, and whatever, scratching their nuts, making 3 times the money from your own work than you do. That's not a just system. And I would say that capitalism used to be one, but when you start scaling it up, it just is the snowball of wealth and power that gets into a smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller number of hands. That, like, what freed us, capitalism freed us from feudalism, and it's growing back into feudalism 2.0, like the new version of it.
It's reached a boundary is the problem. Capitalism was a good step. It's an important step. There's not... you don't go around saying that capitalism is just inherently bad, and that if we hadn't taken that step, then things would be better, because it's an important step in our evolution of thinking and understanding. Yeah. But the problem is it comes up against boundaries. You have a capitalist-based system, which is it's consumption-based. That's all there is to it. Capitalism is consumption-based. A small amount of people have a large amount of property, and they distribute that property for profit. And when you have 2 billion people on a planet this size, then sure, potentially it works. But when you start looking at 7 billion people or 10 billion people on the planet, you start getting into a real serious problem with overconsumption, with the degradation of environments, the use of finite resources. So it just doesn't work, and it was never going to work. The problem isn't that we have capitalism. The problem is that we haven't moved beyond it. Like when we moved from feudalism to capitalism, but we haven't moved past capitalism, and it's clearly time to move past capitalism. And we certainly have the technical ability to do so, and we have the knowledge to move beyond it as well. But what we don't have, we have this social condition that restricts it, and you've got a small percentage of the population that control all the media that goes out on the planet. So the condition is retained within the larger scope of the species to keep doing this. There's no desire to move beyond it, because the people at the top with all the money, with all the profit, with all the free time, where everything's all good, they want to maintain that.
Yeah.
You know, so there's no interest for those people to start distributing knowledge or producing material that's going to help people to understand how we can change, what changes we can make, and how that would improve on society for everybody. Mm-hmm. The fact that billions of people on our planet is starving is ridiculous. We produce enough food on this planet to feed everybody. It's our method of distributing through a monetary market that means that we have high levels of starvation and poverty on the planet. It's structurally violent from the very start.
And I mean, I would say that it sort of, you know, the argument for capitalism, the best one anyone can give, is that, you know, when it came in, when this notion of free trade started accompanying the European kings and queens and feudal lords, what you had was people that had no titles. You basically had people that owned the land and people that worked the land, and some sort of craftsmen and workmen and artists and so on. So the people that were making something like horse carriages, wheels, blacksmiths and so on, it started rewarding with wealth people with substantial skills, who before that basically were only there to help one lord and were treated as good as their one lord treated them. They had an open, wider market for their goods. As such, they got a bit more wealth, and so it sort of widened the opportunity for people. And even today, you know what? If you're brilliant, if you're honestly brilliant at, say, a certain number of skills that earn money, whether you're a singer, engineer, programmer, doctor, etc., capitalism will reward you with, won't necessarily be fair, but you will have a substantial financial reward for it. And you can almost think of that as a bribe, because brilliant people rarely ever take the full leverage to contribute to society. They basically contribute to investors making maximum profit. And I mean, I had an interesting sort of brush with, I'm starting up a company in education, and we had some meetings with some investors. It was more of an advice meeting than anything else. But honestly, the mode of thinking wasn't, hey, what are you going to contribute? How is it that the children, this is about educational materials after all, and teaching in classrooms and curricula. 90% of the questions were, is it scalable? How many people can you sell it to? What is your plan to make 5 million in 5 years, 15 in 10, and what is our exit strategy? And if most ways that human genius is invested is entirely focused on how to make a little bit of money multiply into a ton of money, as opposed to how to make the most efficient car, how to make a bridge with the least environmental impact, how to make houses that don't create waste, or how to create a medical system that promotes well-being. No, if we approach all these problems with an objective of getting a maximum return on investment, we are not going to get the best possible outcome. We're going to get the most money outcome, but we're not going to get the best possible outcome.
You'll never get the best possible outcome, because the only outcome you're going to get is one that services the problem, doesn't solve it. The last thing capitalism wants to do is solve any problem. You don't solve a problem in capitalism, you service it. And
it's an eternal service, as opposed to, and I kind of feel bad about it, but when our site launches, it's going to be in a mode of a subscription. It would be really nice for people to pay once and have something for a lifetime, but you can't survive you need a constant income stream. And not that it's technically impossible. You could have a product that is good for a lifetime, but even in the software world, you used to buy a program once, and they used to update it for a lifetime. They've decided this is not the most profitable way to go. The most profitable way is a subscription. So if you want an Adobe product, for instance, now you're paying per month.
That's ridiculous.
And, at the end of the day, with the technology that we have, whether it's a piece of software or a piece of hardware, it is completely conceivable that, hey, you could buy it once and it's good for a decade.
I think what a lot of people do, the trolls in particular out there, who like to say, you start talking about the failure of our current economic model and the failure of the structure of our current society and how it impacts on people. The first thing a troll will want to do is point out that system, because we live in the West, that system has worked to our benefit, because clearly, we have more than the poorest people on the planet. But they also want to point out, if you come up with a model like you were saying about your educational business platform, that's going to generate an income for you, you get slaughtered for it. But what people don't want to realize is that while you're talking about the failure of this economic model and this social structure, you still have to live in it yourself. It's one thing to understand it, but you can't just magically live outside of it.
No, it's look, the notion that I don't like the people that blanketly reject every aspect of capitalism. Of course, there's businesses that help people. There are such things as a win-win transaction, but for the most part, the way money is made is not through solving problems, not through... there's a set of how you prioritize, and the priority of every corporation, by definition, is to maximize shareholder return. That is the definition. Mm-hmm. So, if that is top priority, and we're making a drug to treat, psoriasis, some kind of a skin condition. Mm-hmm. And if we develop something that costs us 30 cents, is applied, guess what? We extract it from a tree, it's a tree extract, and it cures it. That's not going to work on so many levels. You can't patent the tree extract. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to waste money genetically engineering a different tree because now that's something that's patentable. And then we're going to spend more millions of dollars weakening our product so that you need 30 treatments as opposed to one. Because that's what it takes to maximize profits. If the goal was to cure something, you would take a very different approach. And it's not that it doesn't work, but by definition, it doesn't seek the most efficient and the optimal outcome. Of course, in some cases, we can find examples that it is the most efficient and optimal outcome. Kind of if you say Uber or Kickstarter or whatever, okay, it's connecting buyers and sellers in the most efficient manner and taking in a relatively small fee and doing it so well that nobody almost bothers competing with you because you are doing it for such, economical terms. But those are the exceptions to the rule. And
they have a negative impact on the rest of industry.
And they have a negative...
So you get a whole segment of people who are working in, say, for taxis, who are quite upset about this at the moment, who end up taking a hit in their pocketbook.
Well, I suppose we can kind of venture in... Right, in my mind, that's capitalism doing a good thing, but it doesn't have a built-in system for its failures. Like the most successful countries in the world have the So the countries with the highest standard of living have got the best safety net systems because it almost comes in with an awareness that if this system works well, it's going to basically wreck some aspects of your society. It will leave... It's incentivized to fire people from their jobs. If those jobs can go overseas or if robots can do it better. So you need a system that basically factors in that through no fault of their own, you know, tens of thousands of people every year are going to be losing their jobs and having to find some other alternative. A lot of people don't even wish to acknowledge that. Family back? No. But I just, again, like if we start from the point of how society should change with this acknowledgement that purely through maximizing profits, every corporation has an incentive to fire workers. At the same time, with that incentive, for the first time, technology in my field, robotics and automation, is getting better and better at replacing people. Robots are initially the people in poor third world countries, be that, you know, variety in East Asia or South America, were cheaper than any machines. But now the machines are getting cheaper than even the third world labor. And you're going to be in a situation where there is no productive way to employ half the planet's population. So you're either going to accept that at a systemic level and go, hey, we need to take a cut of what is produced to make half the population live in relative comfort, or we're going to have, you know, hundreds of millions, in fact billions of people on the street helping themselves to what they can help themselves to, which basically means, you know, a social upheaval, the types of which, you know, needs something drastic to happen, like a revolution, a war, or something like that. So I'd say capitalism is sort of reaching this point, and the first step that it needs to take to reform is just completely acknowledge in every Western country that, hey, half the people with the skills that they have lost any relevance to the market as it stands right now. As human beings, you know, you can either take the position that they have a right to live and we have a responsibility to provide for them, or you can take the position that they will fucking kill us unless, you know, we can at least take care of their basic needs. Like, I'd say that there a shift is so inevitable in that area. And the only real question is how much austerity, pain, and so on is going to get inflicted before that shift happens. So I don't know. What's your take on it?
I think we're so far beyond the problems we face, or problems we haven't even recognized yet as a society. The unemployment that we're about to experience because of machine automation, 3D printing, are going to pale in comparison to when our climate warms and the weather patterns alter, crops fail. That's the real issue we'll be facing in the next, I don't know, maybe 50, 60 years. And unemployment will be nothing by that time. When that starts hitting, unemployment will be the least of anyone's worries. We'll have to move so rapidly in a direction of help. We'll either have to move in the direction of helping each other very quickly, or in the direction of just absolutely not caring and watching people die. It'll be that simple. And that's what we're faced with. And that's what people don't want to see.
Well, you're really so you hold I mean, how likely is the scenario of extreme climate change in your mind?
It's inevitable. If we don't make serious...
In our lifetime?
I'd say within the next 50 to 60 years. I'd be surprised if we didn't notice some really, really big changes. The amount of melt rate that's going on in Antarctica which I know that there's a whole host of people out there that want to live on the false notions that the science is flawed or inaccurate. It's not even a debate anymore. I don't even waste my time debating with those people anymore. You can see it happening. The fact that the Arctic ice melts in the summer to the extent that it does is evidence enough. The way the sun's solar energy reaches the planet, when that ice is gone, the temperature of the water increases because of the way the planet absorbs solar radiation.
See, here's kind of my take on it, and you know that I'm partially a skeptic, but the fact that human activity has warmed the planet at this stage is indisputable. You just look at the historical record running up until 2015, and the trend is upwards, right? Most of the fuel for skepticism comes from criticism of the IPCC climate models, and it's in a way a very faulty way. I think it's not a mistake that the general conclusion that we have global warming, I think, is an accurate one. The idea of studying it through models is, I think, a very flawed idea. I mean, I happen to work in modeling of physical systems, and we couldn't predict to like 5% certainty whether a crane could hold a certain amount of weight. And it's like a uniform material processed in a very specific way under very, very, very specific conditions. Now, the notion that people can model a planet that is whose climate is so sensitive, a 5% error produces a drastically different result, is from the start, in my mind, a flawed one. But when you look at the trends up until today, I think you can make, just on the basis of that, a solid argument for human activity negatively affecting climate on planet Earth.
The modeling and the predictions that are made by the scientific community are historically conservative. In fact, if you go back to the 1970s, 1960s, and you look at the predictions that the scientists were making then, we have overshot those predictions well and truly.
But
left those predictions.
The predictions that were made around the turn of the century were all undershot. So they were basically overshooting them until the millennium, and then undershooting them since the millennium. But it's like, to turn that into a debate, into like science isn't settled or there's a huge doubt, I think it's a bit of a misnomer, because it's like, if there's a problem with your camera taking weird and inaccurate images of a fire going on downtown, that doesn't mean there is no fire going on downtown. There means that your camera is a bit glitchy. And that's kind of how I look at it. The evidence that the models are problematic. And with this, I am with the climate skeptics, deniers, whatever word you want to use, because I was in the field and I have looked at the graphs. They're really bad at predicting the climate. They sell it. When they say we need action because this is what the models say, that's the main pitch. Unfortunately, the models suck. And it's a very bad way to pitch. And it's almost like, I don't know, like you're taking your weakest argument as your main argument, and your bulletproof argument of undeniable ice core records, melts, and so on, as the third thing you say instead of the very first. And I mean, look, we're talking semantics here, but why not make an argument like this? The Earth's warming, here's the charts, conclusive. Now, we don't know if this thing is basically a positive feedback loop or the feedbacks are negative, but we're giving it a 20% chance. We're giving it a 20% chance of doomsday in the next 60 years. If somebody told you that the house you're living on has a 20% chance of collapsing into a hole into the ground, you would sell it for half its value, move out, and live somewhere else.
I think I think I approach it from the perspective that I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But if people who doubt the amount of damage we're doing to the atmosphere and the oceans and terrestrial land are wrong, and we do nothing but sit on our hands, then we're basically cutting our own throats. If I'm wrong, we're fine.
Oh, if you're wrong, it's fine. Like, we'll even clean up the environment a little bit along the way. Like, it's and you know, I think people have this completely irrational desire for certainties. Politicians can't sell a 20% chance of a disaster as a call to action.
I don't know that the climate models are as wrong as you think they are.
I know, fair. I mean, 20% is like a very probably
low.
It's a very low estimate. But what I'm saying is, even at that, if someone told you there's that chance of you getting a heart attack in the next year, you would spend $5,000 getting every exam under the sun to protect against it. And we're doing nothing on the basis like carbon trading, which is essentially the next...
It's just an economic process.
Which is the next level of a scam for Wall Street banks.
I think that's where a lot of people get upset with climate science, is because what they see is the political move to it, which is just a lot of economic bullshit. It's not actually doing anything. You don't do much of anything by trading by trading carbon. Yeah. All right. If you want to do something, you stop producing the carbon going into the atmosphere. So all this political bullshit is just that. It's just bullshit way to make more money. But it's not actually dealing with what the science is saying is going on.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at Greenland and Antarctica and the Arctic and the glaciers, every single glacier on the planet is in rapid decline. It's rapidly melting. It's not just some slow happening thing anymore. This is really rapid decline that we're seeing. The Antarctic,
Greenland, especially the northern hemisphere, the southern is like declining much more slowly, but the north is like we're gonna have no ice in the summer,
and which is going to trap more heat into the ocean, which make the ocean warms. The ocean doesn't have to warm a whole lot for that to impact Greenland and the Antarctic. Yeah. But not only that, the Antarctic melt is increasing at a rapid rate. Okay. It's absolutely astonishing. When you see the ice growth for the sea ice, in particular around the Antarctic, what you're seeing there is a weather pattern that's really important to our planet. And the sea ice that develops during the winter from that weather pattern is crucial, right? But it doesn't represent any change in sea level rise at all, because all you're doing, it's like putting an ice cube in a drink, right?
Yeah, it's the same, yeah.
When the ice cube melts, the water stays at the same level as when the ice cube was frozen.
Yeah, it's the one that's on top of the land.
Yes, when you're on top of that Antarctic continent, that you start getting some real problems. And because of the way the Antarctic's been melting, that ice on that continent is starting to slide off of it, and we're going to see some really rapid sea level rise. And you can see it in Bangladesh, you can see it in Tuvalu, you can see it in a lot of Pacific nations actually, but we ignore all this. And people have gone so far as to say that it's not even happening. Well, the people in Tuvalu are crying out for something. They don't know where to go. They're asking Australia if they're going to be allowed to come to Australia. Well, stop the boats. I don't think so. We're going to end up drowning an entire nation of people because we're not.
I think, I imagine that would be something you definitely, with your documentary, how many episodes do you think are going to be related to climate change? 1 or 2?
Oh, that's going to be really difficult to answer at this stage. I think maybe at a minimum 3, a bare minimum 3, but possibly 5, 6.
I would say
I don't even think there'll be so much dedicated to it as because everything is so interrelated. Nothing is happening in a vacuum. You start looking at the atmosphere, and that means that you have to look at the ocean. You have to look at terrestrial land. You start looking at economics and the impacts of our economic system, and you have to look at all those systems. Yeah. You look anytime you look at something, there's an interrelation. So it's difficult. I don't think I'll be focusing so much on climate change on any of them. as much as I'll be presenting small snippets of information that are detailing what is happening as a result to certain systems on the planet. So there'll be little bits about our impacts on the planet.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I'm going to call it climate change or anything like that. I'm just going to talk more about our undeniable impacts. You know, things that you can't deny, that are not even so much scientific fact, but are just, you can see them. Yeah. All you have to do is open your eyes and you see them, right? So that's where I'll concentrate. Just there'll be little pieces all through the entire process.
Yeah, because in my mind, you know, it's a very contentious topic, and I'd say environmentalists, generally speaking, and I consider myself left-leaning environmentalist, but I'd say that the general global environmental movement fucked up on climate change. They fucked up by prioritizing it above everything else, and they messed up with sort of what argument do you put forward. If you and I are having a debate, and if we're going to have a debate on the best shape of the tables, and if I set up the debate that I'm right, as long as you can't prove to me conclusively that your thing can take an elephant, I'm right. And literally, that is the chalice. They said super impossible to predict. They chose, we're going to predict the climate in the future. It's virtually, people in the profession are going to tell you it's virtually impossible. No. We're going to line up all these scientists and they're going to say this is a good model. You're setting, it's almost like the oil companies framed the debate, and then they said, now if this is the frame, if you can predict the climate very, very, very tightly with a computer model, then we'll believe you. And literally, they've taken the bait. They've taken that bait, and they said, of course we can. We are scientists, and we have a consensus. And when those models don't predict the climate exactly, climate change isn't happening. Wait a fucking second, the ice is not even half as much as it was 15 years ago. No, but the models are wrong, so it's not happening.
Yeah, I think the computer models get far too much airtime. There's not even that much. There's not even that much emphasis on computer models. It's one small aspect of an entire scientific field of study.
I've studied it along. I mean, it's something I've been looking at for 7-8 years, and it's almost like a lesson in how people get irrational on issues, because most people believe it religiously or disbelieve it religiously, and not from a scientific. How politicians sell agendas, and how we have a certain desire for certainty.
I think what's more impressive is the real-time data we get from satellites. You start looking at the real-time data from satellites. And all you have to do is look at it and say, well, wait a minute.
We've all dimensions.
If the melt rate from 2012 to 2013, if that melt rate continues for 10 years, at the same rate, without picking up speed or slowing down, we're in some serious trouble.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even matter. So I don't even know if it's so much a scientist, but if somebody on a computer model is saying it's going to exponentially grow over a certain period of time.
It doesn't have to be even exponential.
It doesn't even have to be exponential for there to be a problem. But I don't think it's not worth focusing on the predictions of a computer model when you've got real-time data.
Completely agree.
But what's really concerning, is that all those satellites in space that are giving us the real-time data are due to stop functioning. And nobody's putting new ones up.
I did not know that.
What happens?
I did not know that.
What happens when we don't know what we're doing to our planet? The data we're getting from those satellites is crucial to our understanding of this really complex system, and they're all coming near the end of their lifespan.
This is worth an article. I mean, this is if you can write about this, please do. I really think that
NASA doesn't have the resources to put new ones up. Nobody's putting new We're more inclined to put up a satellite so that we can have telecommunications than we are to put up a satellite so we can look at our own planet.
That's horrific. That is I find that horrific.
It's scary because we won't be able to monitor what's happening. We won't know anymore.
Because
the only reason we know what we know about climate change now, the only reason we know about the impacts that we're having right now, is because we can look at we can look at the satellite data. We can see it. It's the only way we can see it. And when that's gone, then the idea that people will stop having any understanding of climate change and what's going on and the drivers, it's going to be a whole new situation because people just won't have any access to information, and unless they start being impacted directly, the interest in the whole topic will just dissipate. And what's really, really difficult for people to understand is this is a very slow-moving animal. The amount of change that we've experienced in the climate, the heat that's been trapped, we're talking about carbon additions that were made in the 1800s. The fact that we're at 400 parts per million in carbon at the moment, we have not even begun to feel the impacts of that. And we won't feel the impacts of that for another 50, 60 years. And by then we've pumped more carbon into the atmosphere. It takes almost between 50 and 200 years for carbon to weather out of the atmosphere. So these, as the planet continues to warm, to the level that 400 parts per million will do, as far as warming is concerned, won't be felt for 40, 50 years from now because of how slow, because of the way the planet absorbs radiation from the sun and radiates it out. When solar energy reaches our planet, it does it in what's called the short wave. Now that short wave radiation will go straight through carbon, it'll go straight through water vapor, it'll go straight through methane and hit the planet. And the planet, depending on the color, basically, of the planet where it hits, like, okay, if that short wave radiation hits ice and the white snow or anything like that, it gets reflected back out as short wave radiation, and it escapes to the atmosphere, to space. Now, if the solar radiation gets absorbed into, say, the oceans or to mountains or grass or trees, forests, whatever, now that gets absorbed and then re-radiated out as the long wave radiation.
You know what I'm afraid of? Like, somebody's going to come up with some chemical solution that's going to poison the planet, like putting some kind of an antifreeze inside all the ocean, so when the water evaporates, the ice can stay, snow can stay snowy until 10 degrees or something. I don't know. Like, people go really, really, really paranoid about chemtrails.
Yeah, chemtrails are a piss poor attempt to deflect shortwave radiation. Shortwave radiation. That's what it is, because clouds deflect shortwave radiation.
And
I understand if I remember correctly. But that's what chemtrails are. It's a piss poor attempt.
It's chemtrails is like a sort of conspiracy coined term.
Oh, they're trying to control
it's geoengineering. It's geoengineering. Essentially, it is spraying bright reflective aerosols into the stratosphere
to make clouds.
Deflect some, but those clouds also trap some heat and deflect some. And on the balance, they've been doing experiments, and I don't know if those experiments are even that conclusive. But I think it's, look, my only hope in this regard is our planet is 4+ billion years old. As a system, I think there's a good chance that the feedbacks are going to be negative. There's no guarantee, the idea that our future is we're rolling the dice by what we've put into the atmosphere by industrial civilization. But the best hope we could have almost is that underneath it all, we're going to uncover that the planet has negative feedback mechanisms.
But have you seen the massive amounts of methane that have been leaking into the atmosphere from Siberia?
That is scary. You know, we should
400% better at trapping long-wave radiation.
I know. We need to burn it. So we just turn it to carbon dioxide and water. We need to burn it before it escapes.
Well, the benefit of methane is it only stays in the atmosphere. It weathers out after 25 years.
Oh.
So that's the only thing. So you burn the methane and create carbon, and you end up with a problem where you've got the carbon that will stay there from 50 to 200 years. So you've got a longer range problem. So there's no really great solution to that problem. Because 25 years, while it's 400% better at trapping the long-wave radiation, it's also less than a quarter of the time in the atmosphere, right? So it's going to weather out a lot faster.
We need to colonize Mars. No.
It's not even possible. I looked at that as well. NASA's been looking at it, and their expectation is that we won't even have a low Earth orbit colony for at least another 100 years, and you're talking about a small colony. The idea of getting people from Earth to Mars is ridiculous. It's not going to happen.
Haven't you heard about the reality TV show thing where they're going to...
Oh yeah, what are they talking about?
Mars One?
How many people?
12 or something.
12.
It'll pay for itself because there'll be a TV reality show, which
12. There's 7 billion people on the planet. 12. We're going to get 12 people to Mars, and that's our savior? I don't think so. We've got nowhere to go. There's nowhere else to go. We either take care of our backyard,
or
we send 12 people on Mars.
Oh, that would be
the genetic diversity amongst those 12 people isn't going to establish anything for our species. You need genetic diversity.
They can go there with a bunch of sperm samples, though.
Yeah, they might take the whole. They better get a lot of embryos.
I mean, no, it's Look, I think, as you said, your title, it was the existential threat of culture, or something like that, and really, it's the fact that whether it's capitalism, whether it's consumerism, whether it's the notion of wage slavery, whether it's geopolitics and war and people on this earth right now have bought into too many dangerously flawed ideas. And would you say, though, the average understanding of what is going on, of this, of the world as a system, a closed loop system, sort of what Buckminster Fuller was saying, would you say the average understanding of these political, social, economical systems that enslave us is going up sufficiently quickly, or has any hope of increasing sufficiently quickly?
Well, there's some studies done. I can't remember what university did the study of it. They found that 10%, once 10% of the population understands something, then the rest of the population it takes a long time to get to 10%. Yeah. But once the 10% of the people understand something, then it spreads like wildfire.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. I think because of our culture that we've designed, because of the way we've been raised to live, and this isn't blaming parents, this isn't blaming anyone in particular, because it's a systems failure. It's an error of system. It's not an error of people. I mean, people created the system, but you're talking about a system that was created many, many thousands of years ago. You could go way back to the first agricultural revolution to discuss that. Yeah. And those people who started putting in place the processes that would lead to capitalism now had no idea about any of this. So you can't blame anyone in particular. What you got to look at is, why did we stop learning? In the sense that, why did we stop learning about our own processes and what we're doing? Why did we stop questioning our own systems approach to life? Why did we get to this model of capitalism and just decide that was it? And this is the best we can do.
I'll give you part of that answer. It's specialization. When you get advanced, you develop a need for specialization.
Yeah, well, that's what happened in the first agricultural revolution. When you start putting seeds in the ground and you have a population expansion, which is what happened. So you get a reduction in the amount of workload that for everybody, like the work is spread out over expanding population, and you do get specialization, and that's why capitalism, that's it's part of the process that what led to capitalism is that specialization and that expansion and how that all improved everything.
The consequence of it, though, is that some of the most brilliant minds on the planet go into an office and then they do the same knee surgery 5,000 times and then they die. Because you just, too few smart people are thinking in terms of the big picture, and too few people in general. We don't think through the consequences of our actions. When you throw something in a bin, where does it end up? When you decide to watch a certain type of television or show, how does that affect, your mind, your perspectives, what food you eat, and so on and so on. Like, we don't actually think deeply or think about long-ranging effects of our action.
After an 8-hour workday, do you really want to sit down and think deeply about anything?
And look, it's not necessarily practical or possible at an individual level to think deeply about everything in your life. But, we don't have any powerful institutions with long-term thinking. As far as I'm aware, there's not a government or anyone out there. UN makes some vague, generalized plans, 50-50.
But all within the framework.
Within the framework, but we've got nobody thinking 100 years down the track. We've got no corporation out there going, what is our environmental impact on planet Earth, and how can we turn that into, a benefit rather than a damage? Nobody is thinking in terms of long-range, positive external effects all around. Like, no powerful institution, no corporation, no government, and as a result of that, it's as if they're just playing the assigned role, of a marching band towards the edge of a cliff, so to speak. But yes, I think how would you see a transition occurring? Like, so some of the more likely scenarios.
I wrote an article on this exact topic, actually, a few weeks ago. Well, maybe 2 months ago. And I think it starts with research. That's the first thing you have to do. You have to be able to I can't remember each individual step I pointed out, but you don't start making any kind of a social transition in the real world until you've done all the research into what it is the planet can provide, what we are producing, how we can produce that more efficiently, what the most efficient use of the resources is, and what it is that we simply don't need. There is a shitload of crap on our planet we simply don't need. You walk into a $2 shop and I'll challenge you to find things that we actually need in that shop. That whole shop is full of shit you don't need. And it's poorly manufactured. It's manufactured for one type of consumer, and that's the low end, can't afford it, I'm going there to buy it consumer. And when you start looking at, first, it's not going to last long because it's crap. It was built to fail. Like everything is built to fail, but that stuff especially. That stuff is not designed to last at all. You're going to buy it, you're going to use it for a certain amount of time, maybe weeks, days, months, and then it's going to go and you're going to go buy it again for another $2. And all that kind of bullshit's got to stop, period. But how a transition will start, it will be with a whole lot of research and a whole lot of people coming together and testing efficiencies against the regeneration of resources on our planet, so we can say, what's the best use for oil on our planet? We don't want to burn it, because that's just stupid, because it takes billions of years for it to happen. So the last thing you want to be doing with oil is burning it, because you burn it in seconds.
Yeah.
But that's where you are. You've got to look at your technical efficiencies. You look at all the efficiencies across the board and how you're using resources on the planet, and then how you can better use those resources and maybe use different resources, like hemp could be a really good example there. And people think, oh, he's talking about hemp, he must be a stoner. It's just, I mean, that's such closed-minded stupidity. You look at hemp and you could produce as much paper with 1 acre of hemp as you could with 8 acres of trees. So it's a no-brainer. You don't have to really think too hard about that. And you can get, like you said, it replaces cotton. And not only does it replace cotton, it's more effective. It doesn't wear as quickly. So
not as comfortable, but hey, like you're right. I mean, the only thing that I have to add, a skeptical note to what you're saying is, it requires what you just said. Requires such an unprecedented level of cooperation.
But that doesn't really have to happen at the start.
Yeah.
You see, if you had, say, there's 7 billion of us on the planet, right? If you say, let's throw a number like 10,000 out there. You've got 10,000 people working together to test efficiencies and to go through and to look at everything and catalog everything onto databases, right? Once that's done, then an educational process begins where you share that information with the rest of the people on the planet. It only takes... people aren't stupid. We're just terribly uninformed. The general public is brutally uninformed about everything. And I mean, it's a bit unfair because I've had a really good opportunity to do a lot of research on a wide range of topics because I've got time. That's the one thing I do have for personal reasons. So that's what I get to have. I get to have time and I get to do all this research. And I totally understand it. Other people don't get that luxury.
Yeah.
They're doing a job 8 hours a day for 5 days a week, and they don't have the opportunity to sit down and read studies and papers and that for 8 hours a day. And after they're done work, they have no interest. And of course they don't, because they're exhausted from doing generally mundane shit jobs, and they want to sit down in front of idle and stuff, right? So once you do get people that are looking at the technical side of things and cataloging everything, then you start an education process. Nothing's changing yet. You're not even beginning to change anything. You're just working on educating people to what is possible. And once people understand what is possible, then you can start putting things into place, like maybe basic income would be a really good step. So that people are covered in this silly system where they pay to live. And then once you've got a basic income in place, you can say, right, let's really be intelligent here. And all you people that are making toys for Happy Meals, I'm really sorry to say this, but we don't need you to come to work anymore because we don't need toys for Happy Meals anymore. And then
it's fine. You've got a basic income anyway.
You've got a basic income anyway. Now, and then when you've got to that point, when you start reducing jobs, and we make, say, 30 different claw hammers in the world today. Have we not figured out how to make the best, most efficient claw hammer? Of course we have. So we'll make that one.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll make 2 or 3. Yeah. But the other 15, sorry guys, you don't need. You
have the most efficient option, and then you have the favorite style alternative, maybe 2 of them. But you're right, there's so much, competition brings the best out. There's so much unnecessary competition that it boggles my mind.
And especially when you start looking at 3D printing. And the places 3D printing are going now are absolutely amazing. But that takes away a whole factory of people.
Yeah.
Because not only can you reduce the amount of products you're making and just make the best products, like the highest end of the product for everybody, but you can do it in a factory that employs next to nobody.
Yep.
So now you've got a big problem with a lot of unemployed people in a system where they have to pay to live. So you've got the basic income to cover people, but what else do you get out of that is people with a lot of free time. And when people have a lot of free time, what do? They do a lot of charity work.
I find that, and this is a personal experience, I worked in, I went straight from high school to uni to a job. Basically, what is it? I kind of skipped a couple of grades in year 2 and 3, but a 20-year run, nearly. An 18, 19-year run of basically working every day. With a teacher, a boss, a manager, a professor, assignments, deadlines. And I can honestly say, since I quit that job, I've had about 3 years of type of work. Done a year of teaching in a high school, but it was 0.8 load. the type of work where my own motivation was the only real consequential. And I'd say it took me about 3 years to get to a level where I comfortably work every day with just this idea, this is good for me, it's good for the world, should be done. So we're that, and I'm one of the most, motivated people I know. And the conditioning that the world's gone under is so strong that it'll probably, even if you introduce a minimum income, it would take a year or two of people sitting around playing PlayStations until they went, nah, fuck this shit. Let's do something productive. And I wouldn't even blame it on the people that are sitting around doing sweet F all, because we have been conditioned to only do stuff if it's required of us by an authority, if there's deadlines imposed by people that are external. And this is not the conditions under which humans do the best work anyway.
No.
And one of the best things that I'd say we can hope for is to come to a point where we start reversing this conditioning. And I wouldn't necessarily promise, so if you put minimum income, people are going to be productive more so in year one. But I'll tell you what, if you took it over a decade, a country with a income and a 30% employment would I would bet my life would outperform in every metric, whether it's productivity, whether it's happiness, creativity, whatever. The alternatives we have today.
Big motivator is going to be the natural world. I just can't get away from it. I was looking at background extinction rates the other day, and the background extinction rate on our planet has
didn't even click on messages. Oh, chat is on messages.
The background extinction rate is equivalent to the sixth mass extinction. The rate at which we are losing species is just absolutely astonishing. So I think there's going to be a big motivator right there when the natural world starts to fail. When we start losing stuff, we'll start figuring out that we have to change.
Yeah, well, look, everything is, I wouldn't even say it's not in an equilibrium because it's a dynamic equilibrium. You could take 100,000 species out in 1 minute and you'd have chaos that would reach a new equilibrium again and again. But I love the story where they reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone National Park.
That was good.
And how drastically that affects everything. And you would never think that an apex predator who essentially kills other animals drastically improves the biodiversity, the biomass, the general thriving of an area.
It changed the way the river went.
Yeah.
It altered the river. That's incredible. It's absolutely amazing, but it's a great example of just how interconnected everything is.
It is. And, if you want sort of vague advice, whether it's personal problems or whether you're looking for a new design for, a blade of a fan, I would say go for a walk in a forest around a lake and you will be inspired. Perhaps one have to give credit, to even the that we do have. People have, out of some anti-economic reason, decided, hey, we're going to have these national parks. Like, we shouldn't touch this. Even though they have every economic incentive to, cut it down, drill it, mine it, whatnot. Enough of us have gone, there's something here worth preserving. And, hopefully that this kind of feeling that, 5% of the population has towards national parks.
It's a shame though that national parks don't work all over the world.
Yeah.
Look at, where am I trying to think of at the moment?
Probably Papua New Guinea or something like that, yeah.
Look at Indonesia where they don't give a rat's about their national parks. It doesn't mean anything. They just cut them down anyway and replant palm. It happens.
Well, it's one of the things I have to say. Australia probably is one of the best records at.
Apart from the cattle ranching in the national park, free-range cattle ranching.
Okay.
Which is, I mean,
look.
It's good though. I mean, it is. I agree with you. There
is like, I mean, I always think that I wouldn't necessarily think that that's necessarily a bad idea. I think herds of ruminants and pastures are sort of, there's no pasture without the ruminants. There's no ruminants without, like, they're part of the same parcel. And, I just remember I visited a friend at a farm, and he's got a bunch of sheep, and he's like, well, I didn't initially want to have a sheep, but you know what? There's no way I could mow down all this grass. It would be way too much work. Having sheep and fencing out like 4 patches of a paddock so you move them from one to another is less effort. And I mean, this is it. Life on this planet. Nature does things easily, and if we just observe it, we can sort of tune into it and help things survive and thrive. But it's easier to maintain a paddock if you have 100 sheep than if you have a giant petrol-powered machine that mows down the grass. Yeah. And I find that that story was. An interesting one. I don't know if this is the perfect note to leave it, but perhaps I should ask Sean any final statements we're about.
No, I'm good. I think we covered all the material. Yeah, it was a good one.
Well, thank you very much, Sean. This was
I
had a lot of fun. Zeitgeist Melbourne Radio will be back next Sunday at 4:30. We'll have certainly new people, new topics, and hopefully. We managed 5 in a row, and we're going to keep going. And all right, so much for today. Take care, y'all. You can sign up with Facebook to comment.
Yeah, Sonny.
Hello, everyone. Sonny here. I am at Sean Hurley's house. Sean Hurley is an up-and-coming documentary maker and a veteran of Zeitgeist. I've known him for probably 3 years plus. Today we'll be discussing the project that he's undertaken, and it has the present name of the Human Experience Beyond Temporal Spans. So it's going to be a very wide-ranging documentary and a very wide-ranging discussion. So what we're going to do at the start is play the trailer that he has created, and set up all the social media accounts. Now, to get in on the conversation, all you need to do, if you're listening to us, is sign in on the same page where this audio is playing live. You can sign into Spreaker using your Facebook, and just drop us a comment, which we'll get to. Okay, so here comes the introduction. Sorry, the trailer. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah.
I now know with the resources we already mined, the knowledge we already have, it's highly feasible to take care of all of humanity at a higher standard of living than anybody's ever known. We now know actually the critical path of how we phase out the fossil fuels burning, how we phase out the nuclear, how we do bring in the wind power, how we do bring in the hydrogen powers and so forth. It actually can be done by 1985.
In the United States of America, when millions of people were going and shopping like crazy, there were a few million other people around the world who didn't buy a single thing.
Oh, it's so hard to believe. Collie, I mean, Black Friday is like a tradition. People love to go out on this day and shop. We absolutely love it. Why do you want them to quit shopping?
But think about it. After this very spiritual holiday of Thanksgiving, why is it that our culture is somehow then requiring us to go out the next day and max out on our credit cards and buy probably more than we need to buy? I think that what those millions of people who went shopping today, I think what they're missing is they don't quite understand the consequences of their consumption, because overconsumption has ecological consequences. You know that overconsumption is in some sense the mother of all our environmental problems.
Oh, come on, environmental problems?
Opened up our solar system in a way which was not possible before the space age. It revealed all of our neighbors in the solar system, and it showed us how much there was to learn and how diverse the bodies are that share the solar system with our own planet Earth.
I am afraid to go out in the sun now because of the holes in our ozone. I'm afraid to breathe the air because I don't know what chemicals are in it. I used to go fishing in Vancouver, my home, with my dad, until just a few years ago, we found the fish full of cancers. And now we hear of animals and plants going extinct, every day vanishing forever.
I think that I'm proudest of the impact Voyager really had, and it was surprising. I did not realize how much impact it would have. When we flew by Neptune, people were standing in line at night at planetariums in order to be able to see the images coming in from Voyager, because they weren't on the web in those days.
It just means that our science, the science of planetary astronomy, is alive and well and expanding.
Wait a minute.
It just means that our science, the science of planetary astronomy, is...
What is it?
Alive and well and expanding.
I'm only a child, and I don't have all the solutions. But I want you to realize, neither do you. You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up in a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert. If you don't know how to fix it, please stop breaking it.
We got into the mess by not paying attention and by business as usual. Humans have been on this planet for something like 1 million years. And for the vast bulk of that time, things change extremely slowly. Population increased very slowly, our technology improved, but by very slow steps. And just recently, this is what's called an exponential. It's flat for a long time, and then boom, you suddenly get a huge increase in population, increase in technology, increase in pollution, increase in our powers to disturb the environment, to change the planetary environment. But we're the same old human beings as we were 1,000 years ago and 100,000 years ago. Not much has changed with us.
Light them all up. Come on, fire.
Student Queen Miss Florida is with us. Thank you so much for being here.
And Brandon followed a front kick to his stomach. Then he punched the man repeatedly while he was on the ground.
It's all about going after Americans who are struggling in poverty.
If it were up to me, I would not have another hospital in this country.
The jury found George Zimmerman not guilty.
It's very important that we don't forget the growth and the jobs.
You're going to choke off job recovery in the future. Everybody knows that.
The Duchess of Cambridge has gone to labor.
Competition is expected to only get fiercer with a limited number of jobs.
The market is rigged against it. Our priority has to be jobs, and what Wall Street is doing well.
We cannot continue down this path.
Coming up here today, I have no hidden agenda. I am fighting for my future. Losing my future is not like losing an election or a few points on the stock market. I am here to speak for all generations to come. I am here to speak on behalf of the starving children around the world whose cries go unheard.
Hola y saludos a todos. धरती के वासियों की ओर से नमस्कार. नमस्कार. विश्व शांति हो.
I think the main legacy of Voyager is to, in fact, have